The Russian Wikipedia is the Russian-language edition of Wikipedia. As of November 2022, it has 1,868,479 articles. It was started on May 11, 2001. In October 2015, it became the sixth largest Wikipedia by the number of articles. It has the sixth largest number of edits. In June 2020, it was the world's sixth most visited language Wikipedia after the English Wikipedia, the Japanese Wikipedia, the Spanish Wikipedia, the German Wikipedia and the French Wikipedia. It is the largest Wikipedia written in any Slavic language, surpassing its nearest rival, the Polish Wikipedia, eightfold by the parameter of depth. In addition, the Russian Wikipedia is the largest Wikipedia written in Cyrillic or in a script other than Latin script. In April 2016, the project had 3,377 active editors who made at least 5 edits in that month, ranking third behind the English and Spanish versions. It is the most popular Wikipedia in many former Soviet republics and the second most popular in others, owing its position in the national language status that Russian had in the Soviet era and the Russification policies during the Soviet Union, and Russian continues to be the second language of most of these states. As of 2022, most notably, it is the most popular language version of Wikipedia in both Russia and Ukraine. Since the early 2010s, Russian Wikipedia and its editors have experienced numerous and increasing threats of nationwide blocks and countrywide enforcement of blacklisting by the Russian government, as well as several attempts at internet censorship, propaganda, and disinformation, more recently during the 2014 Russo-Ukrainian War in the Donbas region and the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine. History. After the fall of monarchy in 1917, the All-Russian Constituent Assembly, elected later that year, planned on establishing a democratic presidential or semi-presidential federal republic, proclaiming the Russian Democratic Federal Republic in January 1918. The president of the RDFR would have been the head of state, elected for a one-year term by a majority vote in parliament involving the deputies of both chambers. Due to the dissolution of the assembly by the Bolsheviks and establishment of their one-party dictatorship, no person was ever elected to this office. Boris Yeltsin came to power with a wave of high expectations not long before the Soviet Union's collapse. In May 1990, he was elected as chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, the highest state office, and thus became the head of state. As a result of the creation of the post of President of the Soviet Union, the Union republics also began to introduce the post of President. To do this, a referendum was held in the Russian SFSR, in which 71% of voters voted for the creation of the post of President, elected in direct elections. On June 12, 1991, Yeltsin was elected President of the Russian SFSR with 57% of the vote, becoming the first popularly elected president. However, Yeltsin never recovered his popularity after a series of economic and political crises in Russia in the 1990s. The Yeltsin era was marked by widespread corruption, economic collapse, and enormous political and social problems. By the time he left office, Yeltsin had an approval rating of 2% by some estimates. Throughout his presidential terms and into his second term as the prime minister, Vladimir Putin has enjoyed high approval ratings amongst the Russian public. During his 8 years in office, the Russian economy bounced back from crisis, seeing the country's GDP increase sixfold, poverty cut more than half, and average monthly salaries increase from $80 to $640. Or by 150% in real rates. At the same time, his conduct in office has been questioned by domestic dissenters, as well as foreign governments and human rights organizations, for his handling of internal conflicts in Chechnya and Dagestan, his record on internal human rights and freedoms, his relations with former Soviet republics, and his relations with the so-called oligarchs, Russian businessmen with a high degree of power and influence within both the Russian government and economy. This was seen by the Kremlin as a series of anti-Russian propaganda attacks orchestrated by Western opponents and exiled oligarchs. Medvedev was appointed as first deputy prime minister on November 14, 2005. Formerly Vladimir Putin's chief of staff, he was also the chairperson of Gazprom's board of directors, a post he had held, for the second time, since 2000. On December 10, 2007, he was informally endorsed as a candidate for the forthcoming presidential elections by the largest Russian political party, United Russia, and officially endorsed on December 17, 2007. Medvedev's candidacy was supported by former President Vladimir Putin and pro-presidential parties. As technocrat and political appointee, Medvedev, Putin's former chief of staff and one-time rival to Sergei Ivanov, had never held elective office before 2009. Medvedev chose Putin as his prime minister. In 2012, Putin ran for the presidency, won, and appointed Medvedev as prime minister. Selection process. Eligibility. A presidential candidate must be a citizen of the Russian Federation who is at least 35 years old, has permanently resided in Russia for at least 25 years and does not have and has never previously had foreign citizenship or a foreign residence permit. Following constitutional amendments in 2020, the requirement of permanent residence in Russia increased from 10 years to 25 years, and a new requirement preventing a presidential candidate from ever having foreign citizenship or a foreign residence permit was introduced. The Russian constitution limits the number of terms a president can serve to 2 terms. Previously, the constitution only limited the president to 2 consecutive terms, allowing a former president to seek re-election after sitting out 1 complete term. However, following constitutional changes in 2020, this was changed to 2 terms overall, allowing the incumbent president and former presidents to serve 2 more terms. Election. The election of the president is mainly regulated by the presidential election law and the basic guarantees of electoral rights. The Federation Council calls the presidential elections. If it does not call a presidential election that is due, the Central Election Commission will call the presidential election. The election day is the 2nd Sunday of the month, and the presidential electoral constituency is the territory of the Russian Federation as a whole. Each faction in the State Duma, the lower house of the Russian parliament, has the right to nominate a candidate for the presidential elections. The minimum number of signatures for a presidential candidate fielded by a political party with no parliamentary representation is 100,000, down from 2 million before amendments to the law. Terms were extended from 4 to 6 years in 2008, during Dmitry Medvedev's administration. The president is elected in a 2-round system every 6 years, with a 2 consecutive term limitation. If no candidate wins by an absolute majority in the first round, a second election round is held between 2 candidates with the most votes. The last presidential election was in 2018, and the next is in 2024. As of September 2022, various prediction market platforms including PredictIt, Polymarket, and Insight Prediction have offered odds between 80 to 90% that the current president will remain in office for the duration of 2022. Inauguration. The inauguration of the President of Russia is conducted 6 years after the previous inauguration. If the president was elected in early elections, they take the oath, 30 days after the announcement of the results. Before executing the powers of the office, a president is constitutionally required to take the presidential oath. I swear in exercising the powers of the President of the Russian Federation to respect and safeguard the rights and freedoms of man and citizen, to observe and protect the Constitution of the Russian Federation, to protect the sovereignty and independence, security and integrity of the state, to faithfully serve the people. Vacancy or disability. Vacancies in the office of president may arise under several possible circumstances, death, resignation, and removal from office. In all cases when the President is unable to perform their duties, their powers are temporarily transferred to the Prime Minister until the new President takes office. Insignia. After the oath of office has been taken by the elected President, these following insignia are handed over to the President. These devices are used to display the rank of their office and are used on special occasions. Chain of office. The first insignia that is issued is the chain of office with an emblem. The central emblem is the Red Cross of the Order for Merit to the Fatherland, with arms in equal size, charged with the Russian coat of arms. On the reverse of the cross, the words benefit, honor and glory appear in the form of a circle. A golden wreath is used to connect the cross with the rest of the chain. There are 17 links in the emblem, with 9 consisting of the Russian coat of arms. The other 8 consist of a rosette, also bearing the motto benefit, honor and glory. At the inauguration of Vladimir Putin, the emblem was placed on a red pillow, positioned on the left side of the podium. According to the presidential website, the emblem is placed inside the Kremlin and is used only on certain occasions. Standard. The standard is a square version of the Russian flag, charged in the center with the Russian coat of arms. Golden fringe is added to the standard. Copies of the standard are used inside their office, at the Kremlin, other state agencies, and while the President is traveling in a vehicle inside Russia. A 2:3 ratio version of the flag is used when the President is at sea. This is the most used symbol to denote the presence of the Russian President. Special copy of the Constitution. The President also has a special copy of the Russian Constitution that is used during the inauguration. This copy has a hard, red cover with gold lettering. An image of the Russian coat of arms appears in silver. The special copy is kept in the Presidential Library. Legal basis of the insignia. These insignia and the procedure were established by the Presidential Decree 1138 from August 5, 1996, and modified by Decree 832 from May 6, 2000. In the new decree, the special copy of the Constitution was removed as the third symbol of the Russian presidency. The other 2 symbols remained intact because they were and are regulated by separate decrees. Nonetheless, the special copy of the Constitution still exists and serves for inauguration purposes only without being officially presented as a symbol of the Russian presidency. Powers and duties. Guarantor of the Constitution. As the guarantor of the Constitution and the entire system of constitutional law, the President ensures that the constitutions, laws, and regulations of the constituent territories of the Russian Federation be in full compliance with the country's constitution and federal laws. Nominations. The President is highly active in appointing top officials in the country. They nominate candidates for official state positions, who must ultimately be appointed based on parliamentary vote. The President submits nominations to the Federation Council, the upper house of the Parliament, for judges of the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court and the Supreme Arbitration Court, as well as for Prosecutor General of Russia. A proposal to relieve the Prosecutor General of their duties must also be submitted to the Federation Council. The President submits to the State Duma, the lower house of Parliament, nominations for appointment to the office of the chairperson of the central bank, and likewise submits to the State Duma any proposal to relieve the chairperson of the central bank of their duties. Legislation. Under the procedure stipulated by the Constitution, the President exercises their right to submit draft legislation, as well as the right to sign bills into law or to veto them. The President has the right to suspend laws and regulations issued by executive bodies of Russia's constituent territories if such laws and regulations contravene the Constitution, federal laws, or international obligations of the Russian Federation, or violate human and civil rights and liberties, pending the resolution of the issue in an appropriate court. The President can issue bylaws by decree, so long as such decrees are not in contradiction with existing laws, Russia's international agreements or the Russian Constitution. The President is further empowered to grant federal pardons and reprieves, and to convene and adjourn either or both houses of the Federal Assembly under extraordinary circumstances. Other powers of the President in the sphere of legal activities and in their interaction with the Parliament include calling elections to the State Duma, dissolving the State Duma in certain cases, and calling a referendum. Domestic policy. Under the Constitution, the President is not empowered to determine the full range of short, middle, and long-term objectives and targets of domestic policy, but only its basic guidelines. In practice, they determine it with the Prime Minister and the Government of the Federation. They are to be implemented both by the President themselves and by the Government of Russia within the bounds of their authority. The President's fundamental positions on domestic policy issues are expressed in their written decisions regarding draft federal constitutional laws and draft federal laws, as well as their letters explaining the reasons for rejecting draft federal laws. Within the bounds of the authority granted to the head of state by the Constitution and other laws, the President also shapes the basic domestic policy guidelines by issuing legal regulations and through organizational and regulatory activity, such as issuing decrees and executive orders. Each year the President is required to make an address to the Federal Assembly regarding the situation in the country and the internal and foreign policy of the state. Foreign policy. The President is invested with extensive rights to implement the state's foreign policy. The President determines Russia's position in international affairs, along with the Prime Minister and the Government of the Federation, and represents the state in international relations, conducts negotiations, and signs ratification documents. The President appoints and recalls diplomatic representatives of Russia to foreign states and international organizations. These appointments are preceded by consultations with the respective committees or commissions of the two houses of the Federal Assembly. The President signs international treaties. Supreme Commander-in-Chief. The President of Russia holds ultimate commanding authority over the Russian armed forces as Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, an executive role vested in the President of Russia in accordance with Article 87 of the Constitution. In accordance with Article 83 of the Constitution of the Russian Federation, Supreme Commander-in-Chief approves military doctrine of the Russian Federation, appoints and dismisses the Supreme Command of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. On September 21, 1995, Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation approved a sketch of the flag of the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Russia. The flag follows the pattern of the standard of the President of the Russian Federation, but has a 2:3 aspect ratio. The flag is raised on the ships of the Russian Navy when the Supreme Commander is on board. On May 5, 2009, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev has established an official emblem of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. Ceremonial duties. An important ceremonial role of the President is awarding state awards. State awards of the Russian Federation are the highest form of official recognition given to individuals for service to the nation in the fields of defense, state building, economics, science, culture, art, education, health care, public safety, rights advocacy and charity. The state awards of the Russian Federation include the title of Hero of the Russian Federation, Hero of Labor of the Russian Federation, as well as orders, medals, emblems, and honorary titles. New state honors and awards can be established by the President, who also presents these honors to the recipients in an official ceremony. A Commission for State Honors, which works on a voluntary basis, helps the President to objectively assess potential recipients. Residences. The primary working President's residence is the Senate building in the Moscow Kremlin complex. Also, the President can use the Grand Kremlin Palace. Previously, the President also could use the so-called 14th Administrative Corpus building, but in 2016 it was demolished. Since 2000 the current home residence of the president is Novo Ogaryovo. It was planned that it would remain at the disposal of Vladimir Putin after his term ended, as Gorky 9, but actually near it, had remained at the disposal of Boris Yeltsin after his retirement. Also, the president has several vacation residences outside of Moscow. Rus, Zavidovo, Tver Oblast. Congress Palace or Konstantin Palace Complex, Strelna, St. Petersburg, reconstructed for 300th St. Petersburg anniversary. Bocharov Rushi, Sochi. Shuiskaya Chapa at a distance of 25 km from Petrozavodsk, Karelia. Dolgyi Borody at a distance of 20 km from Valdai, Novgorod Oblast. Volzhsky Udios Sanatorium on Kubyshev Reservoir shore. Tantal Tourist Center on Volga Bank, at a distance of 25 km from Saratov. Sozny on Yenisei Bank, near Krasnoyarsk. Angarskye Hutara at a distance of 47 km from Irkutsk. Malý Istok inside Ekaterinburg Forestry. Political affiliation. None of the Russian presidents to date have ever been a member of a political party while in office. In 2012, commenting on stepping down from the post of United Russia Party leader, Vladimir Putin said the constitution doesn't forbid the president to be a member of any party, but in the spirit of how our political life has evolved, a president is first and foremost a consolidating figure for all the political forces of the country, for all citizens. Transport. National transport services for the Russian president and the presidential state car are provided by the Special Purpose Garage. The SPG is a unit within the Federal Protective Service. Limousines. Oris Senate main car. Mercedes S600 Pullman Guard. Escort cars. Mercedes. Chevrolet. Honorary Escort. BMW. Air transport services for the president are provided by the airline company Rossiya Airlines. Airplanes for long-distance travel. Ilyushin IL-96-300 PU main aircraft. Ilyushin IL-62M. Dassault Falcon 900. Tupolev Tu-154. Yakovlev Yak-40. Tupolev Tu-214 PU. Helicopters. Mil-Me-8. The presidential aircraft uses the same color scheme as standard Rossiya aircraft, except for the use of the Russian coat of arms or the presidential standard on the empennage instead of the flag of Russia. In the spring of 2013 a helipad was constructed in the Moscow Kremlin. According to the chief of the Kremlin Property Agency, construction of a helicopter pad for the president cost 200 million rubles. The helipad is located in the Kremlin's Tainitsky Garden close to exterior walls. Post-presidency. On August 16, 1995, President Boris Yeltsin signed a decree on some social guarantees of persons holding public positions of the Russian Federation and the position of federal public servants. June 15, 1999 went to President Yeltsin's decree on amendments and additions to the previous decree. On November 11, 1999 Prime Minister Vladimir Putin signed a decree on the implementation of the amended decree of June 15, 1999. On December 31, 1999, the day of the resignation of Boris Yeltsin, the President issued a decree on guarantees of the Russian Federation President, stop exercising his powers, and his family, and the eponymous federal law was adopted by January 25, 2001. This law establishes the legal, social, and other guarantees of the Russian Federation's President, stops the execution of its powers in connection with the expiration of their term of office or in advance in the event of their resignation or permanent incapacity for health reasons to exercise the powers belonging to them and their family. President of Russia, cease to carry out its mandate, regardless of age, is entitled to a monthly lifetime pay of 75% of the monthly remuneration of the President of Russia. In the case of the President's death, their family members are entitled to a monthly allowance in the amount equal to 6 times the minimum old age pension, established by the federal law on the day of their death. President of Russia, ceased to carry out its mandate, has immunity. They cannot be held criminally or administratively liable for acts committed by them during the execution of the President's powers, as well as arrested, detained, interrogated, and subjected to a personal search, if these actions are carried out in the course of proceedings relating to the execution of his powers as President. Beginning in 1999, all living former presidents were granted a pension, an office, and a staff. The pension has increased numerous times. Retired presidents receive a pension based on the salary of the government. All former presidents, their spouses, and their children until age 16 are protected by the Federal Protective Service until the president's death. A spouse who remarries or divorced from president is no longer eligible for Federal Protective Service protection. In 2020, the Constitution was amended to grant the former president immunity. This immunity may be lifted in the same manner as the impeachment procedure. Also, in accordance with the amendments, former presidents were granted the right to become senators for life. In May 2008, the Federal Law 68, on Centers of Historical Heritage of Presidents of the Russian Federation ceased to carry out its powers, was adopted. According to this law, the objectives of the centers are the study and public presentation of historical heritage of presidents of Russia as an integral part of the modern history of Russia, the development of democratic institutions and the rule of law. The centers will be built for each former president of Russia. The first such center dedicated to Boris Yeltsin was opened in 2015 in Ekaterinburg. In the future, the creation of presidential centers for Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev is also planned. List of presidents.